Hello, everyone. I'm here with Steve Hasker, CEO of Thomson Reuters. And today we're going to talk about how Steve and the Thomson Reuters team are navigating and investing in AI, both the opportunities and the risks associated with AI. To get things started, I'd love to have Steve tell a little bit about his background and also what's at the top of the Thomson Reuters board agenda.
Great, thanks for having me, Brian. It's good to be here. So I've been at TR just over 4 years as CEO. Prior to that, I worked with TPG, with one of their portfolio companies. Prior to that, I was at Nielsen for 8 years. Prior to that, you and I were at McKinsey together for 12.
We're at McKinsey, yes.
So, and it's been an interesting 4 years at TR because, of course, the first two were consumed by the pandemic. And the way we used that time was to really sort of, buckle down and design what we called a change program to modernize our tech stack and reinvent our end-to-end customer experience, streamline things and get ready for what we saw coming in terms of tech disruption. I don't think we were quite smart enough to know exactly the sort of complexion, look and feel of that tech disruption, but certainly the change program for us in the first couple of years of my tenure was our sort of get fit program that readied us for what we've subsequently encountered.
And you guys have made a lot of investments in AI. So I'd love to know a little bit about that, the context behind it, and kind of the board reaction to you guys pushing hard on AI.
Yeah, I mean, so first and foremost, we serve, in a similar way to Diligent, we serve professionals that we believe, or professions that we believe will be transformed by AI. To some extent, they already have been, but we really think generative AI will be an entirely new level of disruption. I mean, the way I think about it in my career, I've seen the advent of the PC on every desk, the advent of the internet, mobile, social, cloud. Our view is that generative AI over a period of years will be as transformative as any of those disruptions. And so with that as a backdrop, the company has been immersed in advanced machine learning and artificial intelligence for more than 30 years. I mean, as one example, we put a functioning search algorithm on the front of our Westlaw data set in the early 1990s. So before Google was Google, we were in that area and producing products that worked for our customers. So when Gen AI came along, specifically ChatGPT-4, I don't think anyone was quite ready for it, but we had certainly decades of deep domain expertise and of course content sets. And so with that in mind, starting about 18 months ago, a bit longer, we put pen to paper and discussed with our board a build, partner, buy strategy. The build was to take $100 million and devote it to building new products using Gen AI and injecting generative AI into our existing flagship products. The partner component really started with Microsoft. We were the first partner announced at Microsoft's Build conference last year, which was around about April, May, as a co-pilot partner, and we've sort of pursued various partnership opportunities with Microsoft and others since then. And of course, the buy strategy. We're lucky enough to have between now and the end of 2026 about $8 billion in dry powder, and we've put a couple of $1 billion to work already. We've still got 8 to go. And that was principally around an acquisition of a business called Casetext. And what Casetext had done under the leadership of Jake Heller is got early access to ChatGPT-4 and really cracked the code on combining a large language model with proprietary data sets to produce some pretty stunning results for, in their case, attorneys. And so we could not have been more excited about doing that acquisition, and we closed it in August of last year, and it's everything we thought it was going to be and more. So build, partner, buy is the way we've approached it. And the last thing I'd say is, I think if we look at this sort of transformation that'll be driven by the emergence of large language models and generative AI, I would suggest that, if it's a 9-inning game, we may be at the end of the first inning. So in other words, it's early days. Very proud of the start we've made, but I think equally aware that there are many twists and turns to go.
And so I'm sure there was a a decent part of education that was required, kind of going on or accelerating a journey that you guys have already been on. And how did the education or the framing of the different opportunities go with your board? And then separately, I'm sure it required a healthy amount of education, enablement of the organization. Can you talk about each?
Yeah, so we've done quite a bit with the board in terms of, availing the board members of our own internal AI training programs, and those are extensive, and so any board member can and does engage in those programs and sort of get the same foundational knowledge that the rest of us have. In addition to that, we've spent a lot of time with the board just describing our product roadmaps, and I think most importantly, demonstrating the products in a fairly immersive way. I think one of the ways that people learn, particularly senior board members, is when they actually see the product. Because they can relate to it to the extent that in their own professional lives they were dreamt of having the access to a product like the ones we're developing, and I think that's made a big difference. Now for the 27,000 colleagues, we've done a couple of things. We coming out of the pandemic, we felt very strongly about sort of preserving and enhancing the mental health of our colleagues. So we put in place 2 global mental health days where the entire day is no meetings, no calls. It's dedicated to personal time and family and so forth. And that was very impactful in many, many different ways. And so with that sort of idea in our heads, coming into this Gen AI cycle, we've put in place, starting with 2, and we'll likely expand it, 2 global learning days, cool. One of which happens to be tomorrow. And so through that, we put significant resources in front of all of our colleagues and encourage them to take the day to immerse themselves in one or more topics. And obviously, AI is always front and center to the sort of curriculum.
As you talked about your build, partner, and buy strategy, how did you think about, on the build side, but also probably on the partner side as well, having the right team to actually do that or injecting the right capabilities? And how did you think about, adding more people versus enabling the team you had? I'm sure it was a bit of both, but how'd you?
Yeah, I think, some of it's been, I think, the skill of our Chief People Officer, Mary Alice Vucic, and her team in sort of over the last number of years, really going through and being very focused in terms of ensuring we've got the right talent in the right places. So I think as a starting point, we're in a good spot. I think secondly, we were prepared to bet on very talented but young, sort of less tenured colleagues in senior product and engineering positions. And at the time, that may have been a little bit nerve-wracking for sort of board members and those looking on. But when you encounter a transformative and potentially dislocating technology, it's the young folks who typically just, just take it on.
Go all in. Yeah.
And so therefore we have in leadership positions people who just very naturally have either come to us with significant domain expertise or very quickly, generated it and been able to spread it throughout their teams. And so again, I think as we sort of, to use my analogy again, as we come out of the first innings, I think we've established a leadership position, and it's the investment level around build, partner, buy, and putting the right talent in the right spaces that we've just got to continually work on.
And then if you talked about even the board conversation around, huge opportunities for you and your business with AI, how about the risk side of it? Or what were the sensitivities that you, that either that you discuss with your board or that you just, practically speaking, have to manage across the business?
Well, I think the biggest risk from a sort of a commercial standpoint and a customer service standpoint is that of hallucinations. And for us, it's both a risk and an opportunity. We own many or most, I'd like to think, of the very best data sets in legal, in tax and accounting, in risk and fraud. And so, those are very powerful means to train these models, and I think put us in a really good position sort of competitively in terms of our role as this environment changes. So, that's both the risk and the opportunity. I'll give you an example though. I mean, Alessandra Galloni, our editor-in-chief, is taking Gen AI and really has a very fulsome agenda in terms of making sure that all of her 2,600 journalists and editors that the technology is available to them, that they're trained on it and they're comfortable. And so she's starting that journey through our newsroom, the Reuters newsrooms, and the bureaus. Now, the benefit of that is that much of the sort of grunt work of being a journalist and editor, a video editor, a photo editor, we think can be replaced by machines. And therefore, we like to think that the job becomes more stimulating, more fun, less taxing from a sort of a sheer hours point of view. And of course, in an environment where we have two significant wars, we have a swathe of elections this year, and many of which are very, very newsworthy, not least of which in the United States, and all of the sort of associated issues with interest rate movements. Just that is the sort of setting the table for a newsroom. It's an extraordinary time. And it doesn't matter how many journalists you have, you just can never get through as much as you'd like to in service of our customers. So we think that the technology is really going to sort of supercharge our newsrooms. Now, with that comes some risk, because Reuters is governed by what we call the trust principles, which ensures that everything we put out is independent, fact-based, triple-checked, does not include a lot of opinion, but therefore is not biased.
It's a different standard than in other parts.
It's a very different standard, and Reuters is the largest wholesaler of news. So in a sense, we have that obligation as we provide news information to LSEG, who are our biggest customer to Reuters, but also to all of the media companies that take our content and then add their twist and their opinions and so forth on it. And so, the risk is that the machine hallucinates and produces a news story, heaven forbid a photograph or a piece of video, that is not factual. And so we cannot afford for that to happen. So the other thing we're doing is just making sure that we're applying the technology correctly, but also we're putting in the checks and balances to ensure that we don't have those kinds of escapes.
Someone checks, I assume, or some method for checking.
Yeah, there's a number of methods for checking, and we'll be, there'll be places where our proof of concept testing suggests that we can go faster, and I think there are other places where we'll pump the brakes just to ensure that we don't breach those trust principles, and because I think we're in an environment where trust in news and in media is compromised. And so, one risk of AI is that it just sort of widens that problem. And so we want to make sure.
I assume that trust takes a long time to build, but unfortunately, it can be eroded quickly.
Yes.
And so, on the business-to-business side of Thomson Reuters, what's the dialogue around AI and privacy with some of your clients, and how data and information is used? Yeah,
I mean, look, first and foremost, the sort of promise that we make our customers is that their IP, their information, their query, their question to an AI-driven product will not be part of our output. So in other words, no competitor or customer of theirs is going to see their IP come through the answers we produce. And there are a number of ways we do that, one of which is through the sort of application of what's called the RAG methodology, which really protects the prompts and the cues and the sort of composition of a question as it calls upon a large language model. This is really important. I mean, particularly in serving the legal community.
Sure.
It's just that is not a wire that we can trip. And so again, we're very confident we're going down the right path, but we need to stay diligent on that.
I appreciate staying diligent on it. If you take a look at what the next 2 or 3 years will look like from a Thomson Reuters perspective, what are you most excited about from a pure innovation perspective that'll come from AI?
I think that the thing that's really exciting for me to see is I have, software engineers and data scientists coming to me and saying things like, Steve, I just worked the weekend, but just to be clear, I did it because I really want to. I'm really fired up about what I'm doing, not because I had to, and that's great to see, where you see sort of young talent in our tech centres, whether it's in Toronto or in Switzerland, in Bangalore, in Mexico City, saying those kinds of things. Then you realise, we're well placed. If talented people are getting really excited about their work on a day-to-day basis, good things should happen, and that's, I think, the thing I'm most excited about.
And one of the most frequent questions I get asked from our board member clients and users are, how do you think about, or how should you think about AI and governance? And so you guys have obviously tackled that at Thomson Reuters.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that sort of crosses my mind on that, and we've talked quite a lot about this with our corporate governance committee, is that AI is not a separate conversation for board members. You know, it's not sort of, let's reserve a little bit of time on the schedule every other board meeting or every board meeting to talk about AI and its influence. It really needs to sort of permeate every conversation, in our view, whether it's in terms of the talent strategy, the broader overall growth strategy, how you're thinking about cost and efficiency and applying it internally, product strategy, the whole thing. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think, in my view, boards have been dealing with similar risks and increasing risks for decades. And so most tenured board members are pretty well versed, and most boards, I think, are pretty well versed at sort of understanding what it means to identify and sort of oversee risk management. And so I think that the other thing is just to make sure that those pre-existing frameworks are strong, and that you run the sort of potential influences of AI through those.
And boards, as you noted, have had to deal with managing and mitigating and overseeing a good number of risks. What's different about AI?
I think the speed at which it moves. I mean, it's been interesting to watch, even this year. Here we are in mid-April, and the sort of landscape of products and services, the positioning of various players, has changed fairly markedly in 4 months. Since our first board meeting in the first or second week of January, the landscape feels different, and that that sort of speed of movement is it's not new, but it certainly feels more accelerated than I've seen before.
Exciting.
Very exciting, yeah.
But has to be harnessed, I suppose, at some level.
Yeah, for sure.
If you take a step back on the overall board agenda, you talked about we are operating in an environment of uncertainty, additional risks, macroeconomic uncertainty, geopolitical. How does that all impact, or how do you think about the overall Thomson Reuters board agenda?
Well, one of the great things that our board members come to me and sort of are excited about is, at most of our board meetings, we actually feature a number of our journalists.
Cool.
So we will ask a correspondent who's on the battlefield in Ukraine, who is in the Beirut or the Jerusalem bureau, someone who is monitoring the sort of the latest from the Bank of China, to come in and speak to the board live. And board members consistently tell me that's
cool.
Yeah. Well, it's cool, but it's also extremely valuable information from people who I think in many or most cases are gifted and have sort of immersed themselves and their lives in their area of expertise, and so they're truly world experts. And so, that is obviously somewhat unique to our board, but it's in my job, it's one of the most fun things, is to sort of help figure out who we're going to feature and how we sort of make the conversation as fulsome as we can.
Impactful, but also sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
So now a couple of rapid fire questions. Steve, what is the biggest risk that you've taken, either personally or professionally?
Look, I think there were lots of risks through the pandemic. Just to sort of roll the tape back, I actually started the job. I think the date was March 15th, 2020, and that was a Sunday, if my sort of memory serves me correctly. Anyway, I started on a Sunday, and the first call I had was at 9 a.m. on that Sunday, and the question was, Steve, should we ask, at that time, 26,000 people to work from home? And I was asking questions like, do we have an enterprise license with Microsoft Teams or with Zoom, and how old are our laptops, and with our customer-facing products, how many are on-prem and how many require can be sort of updated and maintained from afar. Anyway, like everyone else, we made the decision to ask people to work from home, and that worked out, like most, if not everyone else. But I remember sort of getting midway through that call and thinking, I don't know. I mean, I've never faced anything like this. I don't think anyone ever had. But it sort of reminded me, and sort of sports analogies are overused, but there's a particular coach from my hometown who says, the bigger the game, the simpler the game plan. And I remember thinking, okay, so if you boil this one down, what's it about? And it's about the health and wellness of our people. We're in a business where we are providing content-driven software to professionals, and that the quality of not only those products, but the sort of service and follow through is dependent on our people. And so it sort of boiled down to, we just got to look after our people. And the best way to do that is to get them out of the office and off public transport and into their homes. And so it ended up being a relatively simple decision. But I will say, when I went to bed that Sunday night, I remember thinking, well, this could be a very short tenure, just given that sort of decision on day one.
Many years ago. So, and so you've been in boardrooms, over the course of at many different stages across your career. What's your advice to the person going into their first board meeting?
Ask questions. Yeah, I think, I remember my first board meetings quite well, both in our time at McKinsey, where I'd be asked to sort of present to a board, or I think, more relevant to the question, sort of when I first joined a public or private board, and walking in with sort of a reasonable amount of terror, thinking, they're about to find out that they've made a recruiting error here. I don't know as much as they think I know, and I'm not going to be as helpful as they think I'm going to be. But the thing I figured out pretty quickly was ask a few relevant, well-researched questions which are on point and help progress the board's thinking and conversation. And anybody can do that. You don't have to be a tenured board member with lots of experience to figure out what are some good questions to ask. And I think once the rest of the board have heard your voice and got a sense for how you formulate questions and the kinds of things you're pushing on, it just, I think it helps everyone, including yourself, just to get settled in and start to be a bit more productive.
Elon Musk says that AI is going to be smarter than humans in 2026. What's your takeaway from that? I
think given the sort of the progression from, if we take OpenAI as one example, the progression from ChatGPT 3.5 to 4, I think you'd have to say he's right in terms of the end state. When it happens, I'm not clever enough to predict whether it'll be 2026 or further out. I don't know, but I certainly think if we continue on anything like the trajectory of the last 18 to 24 months, it's absolutely possible. Exciting, staggering, exciting. Anything you'd like to add? Anything I didn't ask you, Steve? No, just thanks for the opportunity. No, thanks for coming on, Steve, and appreciate catching up and chatting about everything AI. Great, thanks, Brian. Thanks. That was great. Thank you all for joining. I definitely learned a lot in that interview. I hope you all will join me for my next interview, where we bring another CEO into the boardroom.